Hi everybody, it's Lydia the lawyer from Shelley Legal. I've had to put this video together under very difficult circumstances due to lockdown, and unfortunately that meant I wasn't able to meet with our guests in face-to-face. So I apologise for the roughness of the video, but it is such an important topic. Domestic violence and family violence is set to increase under lockdown. So I really hope that this video is beneficial and provides information that can assist you or somebody that you love or know. If there are any issues with respect to getting out of your home safely, or you need further resources about what to do for somebody else, there's going to be a list of organisations and their contact details at the end of this video. If you need any other assistance, don't forget that they're available, they're still open, and attending legal, medical, domestic violence service providers or your lawyer to get advice are still reasonable excuses that permit you to leave the home during lockdown. Stay safe, everybody, and I hope this video is beneficial. Hi everybody, it's Lydia the lawyer from Shelley Legal. I'm here today with Danny Miqati from Precision Integrity Services. He's going to talk to us today about the practical impact of domestic and family violence during the lockdown period, also the trends that Danny's noticed in regards to DV and family violence, and some advice about what we can do to try and alleviate any experiences that somebody might be struggling with at home with respect to family violence. So Danny, thank you so much for coming on today.
Good morning, Lydia. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you hate this question, but I'm going to ask you, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what you do and your experience, especially in regards to DV?
Okay, well, I suppose in terms of domestic violence, the vast majority of my experience comes from my time in the police force. So I was initially a domestic violence liaison officer for a number of years at Bankstown, local area command, and then I ended up becoming the team leader of domestic violence and started to train police officers in DV. I did a fair bit of work on creating part of the working party for New South Wales Police domestic violence policy and how police respond to domestic violence, and then moved on to become a guest lecturer for the family violence unit at the University of Western Sydney. And I've continued my work in domestic violence since leaving the police force. And in our private capacity now, we do a lot of work with domestic violence service providers, and we train frontline caseworkers, we assist lawyers. But basically, my passion is working with frontline and some private clients in sort of higher level safety planning and the best way to intervene and disrupt domestic violence abusers.
So you have decades of experience, particularly with handling DV and how it manifests in cold communities as well.
Yes.
So before I get to the trends that you might have noticed regarding family violence during this lockdown period, can you tell me a little bit about, in the decades of experience that you have, how the nature of domestic and family violence has changed?
Look, I'd love to say that it has changed for the better, but to be honest, in terms of its volume, in terms of its veracity and its level of violence, I don't think it's changed much. If anything, I believe due to the technology available these days, it's a different beast, and it can be quite clandestine in terms of how technology is used to pursue, especially to stalk survivors of domestic violence. What has improved is probably the capability of services in terms of responding to DV. I would definitely want to see a hell of a lot more done in terms of behaviour change for offenders. I don't think we've really gone very far advanced in the 18 years or so that I've been in the industry. And I think it's also been a little bit positive in terms of men sort of acknowledging their role when it comes to domestic violence awareness and campaigns along those lines, because in the end, the vast preponderance of services are very much female driven when it comes to DV, and I think that's something that definitely needs to change for there to be impact.
And you touched a little bit about technology essentially allowing perpetrators of DV to exercise coercion and control and to commit family violence. Can you give an example for what does that look like in a practical sense?
Well, what we've found, and especially in our industry, so we're a team of basically private investigators. Most of us are ex-law enforcement operatives, And we've seen a lot of the use of things like trackers, so GPS tracking on vehicles especially, covertly, sort of placed, most of them probably illegally, I'd have to say, even after the woman has left the relationship. So the abuser is still basically keeping track of where she's going, and then dropping those subtle hints, basically showing her that he knows where she is, he's got people following her, and we've used our technology to expose those kind of devices. And also I've seen a lot in terms of social media, domestic violence abusers are all about control, and they will actually hijack the social media platforms of the survivor. And so you don't really know who you're chatting to. Okay, so there's these men, and I'll use the term men because the vast majority of these abusers are men, and all the ones we've sort of come across so far have been men. They know how to speak in the same rhetoric as their wife or girlfriend, and so you don't really know who you're talking to. That can be a really, really sort of dangerous position, for the woman to be in.
So during lockdown, have you noticed an increase or come across an increase in DV and social media or technology? How, for example, during lockdown, when people might be trapped at home essentially with the perpetrator as a result of the stay home orders,
Yeah.
what have you noticed in terms of how that family violence is manifesting?
What we've seen is a lot of the service providers that we support in the background are asking us how we're going to get through to the woman now, because usually they would, go see them in person, and realistically, considering even with the health orders, and I'm sure you could sort of expand on that, Lydia, but going to see someone for DV would definitely be essential. I don't see you breaking any rules along those lines. It's for your survival. But I think it's difficult now because how are you going to explain why you're leaving the house? So, your safety planning really has to be a bit more creative. And this is where we've seen the providers reach out to us. And we've given advice in terms of, okay, you're going to the pharmacy, you're going to the doctor, and, even make those appointments, so that if it is a legitimate sort of cause to leave the house. And when you go there, when you get into the GP or you go into the pharmacist, reach out for help. Ask them to use the phone, to call those services that you do, because these DV support services still have their numbers are active. They'll still respond to you. And it's good just to touch base and let them know that you are okay, especially if you're being currently case managed by those services, because don't think they've forgotten you. It's just that they're not going to risk getting you in trouble by calling you at home because they don't know who's listening. I think that's really important for everybody to understand that. The communication is what's going to be the difficulty now during the lockdown.
Look, and that's exactly right. For anyone listening there, if you have a mental health appointment, if you have a domestic violence support caseworker appointment or a legal appointment, they are considered, or a medical appointment, they're considered reasonable excuses for you to be able to leave your home. And I just want to add the issue about children returning to schools. I've been very clear that if your child is unsafe at home as a result of family violence, or you yourself are experiencing family violence, the Premier has indicated that no child will be turned away from the school gate. The reality is, for some children and for some families, it's far safer having their child attend school than what it is remaining at home. So if you know somebody in this situation, or you yourself are in this situation, I would urge you to consider, and if you want to get legal advice or medical advice about this happening, but I would urge you to consider whether or not it's safer for you and your child to return to school. Danny's talking to us about creating essentially opportunities, little snippets of opportunities for you to leave the home, to get access and to get support. And I think that's really important, Danny. You've mentioned pharmacists, you've mentioned GPs as well. They're often the front line of dealing with DV and family violence. And I think that's a really important message for people to understand and to get out into the community. When we talk though, Danny, about social media and communication being controlled and those limited access points for opportunity to assist family violence survivors, what advice do you have about people communicating with people who may be experiencing family violence at home, and what are some precautions around that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the precautions that need to be had is, don't assume that just because the phone number's in her name, or there's a WhatsApp picture that shows her face on that profile, that it's her you're chatting to. And I think there's a lot to be said along those lines. I mean, asking, like what we used to do is ask certain questions to verify. So for example, take a quick selfie of yourself, showing the time, stuff like that, just to make sure that it's you controlling this WhatsApp at the moment. Even then, however, it does not necessarily mean he's not standing there next to her, ensuring that she's doing that. So really, we always used to base it on let her steer the contact initiation. So if she contacts you, this is how you respond. But I'd always tell my team, even when I was in the police, always assume that he's there in those communications. And until you can physically see what's going on, we can't take anything for granted. You can sometimes also pick it up from the changes in the answers. Of all of a sudden, oh no, he's okay, he's not that bad. I was wrong about what happened yesterday, forget what I said. All those kind of sort of conversations, people jump to like, oh, what's wrong with her, It's sometimes you don't understand, it's a very real threat behind her. And so you're going to say what needs to be said. In essence, and many times it's really like a hostage situation. And you got to understand that level of trauma. So I would be always on the side of caution on those lines. I mean, hopefully you've got a relationship as a friend or as a neighbor. A neighbor is a good opportunity there if you've got that. Now things are difficult. Even now you have to wear masks when you go to common areas, but that's fine. I mean, again, at the end of the day, take your precautions, wear your PPE. But if she collects her mail or puts out the bin at a certain time, do the same thing. Have that opportunity to have a quick conversation. Do you need me to ask for help? Let me know. I'm just next door for whatever you need. Create a bit of a code name. Whenever I ask for a certain item, that's what that means. So take those little opportunities when you're having those face-to-face interactions to just let them know that you've got support ready to go. And you're keeping her safety at the forefront of your mind when you're making those interactions. It's important to know that even when you're saying, for example, I'm going to the doctor, and then you end up going somewhere else, if there is that risk of GPS tracking on your vehicle, he's going to know that, right? So you're going to want to go to the doctor and then call that service from the doctor, right? So these are the kind of things it's really important to keep in mind, and that's where we train DV staff to come up with those strategies, small things like that kind of example, just to make sure you're keeping her as safe as possible.
And that's another really good reminder, Danny, even in terms of this video, please, if you think that somebody is experiencing family violence at home, please don't tag them to watch this video. Just share it, for example. Don't tag them in information on social media, because Danny's quite right. If their social media accounts are either being managed or controlled or essentially electronic surveillance, it's the worst possible thing that you can do. So Danny, I'm wondering if, for example, somebody's worried about someone at home and whether they're experiencing family violence, is it fair to say that the worst thing you could potentially do is to try and create a relationship at that point? And I'm talking about the distinction between if somebody has a pre-existing relationship compared to a new relationship with the person that they're concerned about.
Yeah, you're going to need, we call them the game cover stories, right? You're going to need to have a reason, because if I'm an abuser and I'm watching my wife talk to this person for the very first time, what's the first thing I'm going to ask? When she comes back in, what was that about? And most people, that are honest people struggle to lie. So you start looking up, trying to think of a reason. When if it's natural, you've already got the story there, right? So it's important that when you're having these conversations with this person, if it is, the genesis of a relationship during COVID, which can happen. You're doing now walks in the park, you meet new people, that's fine. But you need to think to yourself, there needs to be a genuine response ready to go when you're having those questions. And that's the problem. The average person is not thinking that way, right? And so it's part and parcel of what we do, is to try to give people the right cover stories so they're not put in jeopardy.
And you do a lot, as you've mentioned, about risk assessments and risk safety training.
Yeah.
You spoke about surveillance devices and things like that. I know for a fact you've found, unfortunately, a lot of tracking devices on family violence survivors who are still remaining at home.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how common that really is? I mean, sometimes being a family lawyer or a criminal lawyer, you think, oh, are these experiences run of the mill, so to speak? So from your perspective, how common is it, GPS tracking and things like that?
Look, it's very common, and there's multiple ways. What we've found most times you're being tracked by your phone. Most times, vehicle tracking is a little bit more of a risk, so to say, especially if the vehicle is not in your name. It becomes illegal to put any kind of device in someone else's car, and it needs a little bit of a level of technological awareness. Not too much, but enough. People need to understand too. The quickest and the easiest way is just leaving a phone in the car, hidden somewhere, right? As long as that battery lasts, you could get a battery lasting for a couple of days if it's not being called. It's a tracking device. So what we also have seen a lot, especially when it comes to family law situations, is the father or whoever it is giving that toy, to the kid, an iPad, but he's created the iCloud, he's got the account. I'm just giving you a tracking device. I know everywhere you're going with that child, right? So there's a lot to be said about really sort of being a bit more scrupulous when it comes to the devices that you have. It's a lot more common, I've seen, in terms of phones and tablets, as opposed to legitimate tracking devices that you put onto a car. I'd also be questioning, okay, you can have this vehicle, right? Because some of the GPS devices we found are hardwired into the car. Right? And there are certain vehicles that are made, especially the luxury cars, they already come with tracking devices in them. So it's about knowing what you can. I mean, like that's kind of what we see a lot of, where it's your normal everyday stuff as opposed to the higher end sophisticated. Don't get me wrong, it exists, but it's usually people that are a bit more tech savvy, a bit more financially capable, or who are willing to actually go get private investigators to actually go and do the surveillance for them, or give them the technology to be able to do that. So a lot of what we do is to counter what private investigators could do.
I hate to say it, but it almost seems like you're describing essentially a DV hack, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why, my partner Anthony and I went into this business, is because we've seen what's out there, and so we want to hack the hackers. So we can sort of turn the tables, and if we can make people aware of these things, and they won't become vulnerable to those tactics.
And one of my last final questions is for the family lawyers or any other professional out there who's watching this video who might have contact with people who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing family violence, particularly during the lockdown period.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
I think it's also important to understand, as lawyers as well as practitioners, it's expected for you to have conversations with your client, right? And that's another wonderful opportunity of support there. So take that opportunity to have those conversations. Just make sure they're safe. If they need any assistance, and then be able to refer them to the right services if they can. And sometimes you're the only conduit that can be that lifeline to the service. So it's important you sort of equip yourself with the right contacts around you to be able to get that advice yourself on how to deliver the right level of support, because you're not expected to be trained DV counsellors, but unfortunately sometimes you find yourself in that situation. The nature of the industry, like a doctor or other health professionals, you are that bastion of help, and sometimes, especially under lockdown situations, you may be the only sort of mechanism of assistance that can support independently of family members.
That's absolutely really good advice. I mean, in terms of being a family criminal lawyer, there are often times that I have to work with other organisations or other professionals because it comes down to keeping my clients safe, or somebody who's disclosed something to me safe. And it's really important, I think, as professionals, that we understand where our boundaries are and where our capacity ends. So, for example, I might not have the capacity to be a DV counsellor. I might not have the requisite knowledge to do high-end risk assessments. So it's really important as professionals who are watching this, and it doesn't matter if you're an accountant, a pharmacist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is, it's really important that we have a really good network of holistic professionals who can assist us in terms of risk and safety planning for our clients. Danny, one last question. Do you have any other advice or comments on family violence occurring during COVID and what you see in terms of progressive steps forward, hopefully in terms of combating family violence.
I think it's really important to not discount the mental anguish that takes place in this time. If you can think about most situations where you're under threat, you know, whether it's in the workplace, if you're getting harassed or bullied, or, you know, kids in the school ground, at least when you come home, it's a safe place. If I had to basically lock you down with your bully, you're going to have some serious issues. You're going to be facing trauma. You're going to exhibit these kind of symptoms. So it's about really understanding and being extremely compassionate. What tends to happen, unfortunately, is people that are a support for someone experiencing DV start to get sick of their ups and downs, right? And start to get over the behaviours that become, to them, you find them being illogical in the decisions that they make. They're back in love with him. What's going on? You know, she always puts herself in this situation. You can't think that way. You know, these are people that are under significant trauma. Like I said, they're locked in, basically like a hostage kind of situation, and humans will respond to trauma in different ways. So it's important to be really, really compassionate in that area.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Danny. And the other thing is that people do things to survive as well. Yeah. The one I've noticed that is really interesting in terms of how trauma affects your brain and memory is that when you have a client who's experienced family violence, the court process, and it's not a perfect process, often demands or requires a client to give as much detail as possible. And you would know this from your experience as a police officer, to give as much detail as possible in regards to an incident. When did it occur? What happened? And when you've suffered trauma or when you've experienced family violence, your recollection doesn't work like that. It often takes, and this is really good for people who are listening out there, if somebody's disclosing family violence to you, they're not going to sit down and be able to tell you from A to Z everything that's happened in a relationship. That's not how memory works, and that's not how family violence, when you're recounting what's happened, that's not how it works. Yep. And I guess that's a really frustrating part of the process. But Danny, you're quite right. It's about creating those moments and those opportunities of connection and doing it safely and trying to support the victim as much as possible. I just thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And I hope lockdown isn't too frustrating for you.
No, thank you very much. It's really important that we have these opportunities to speak about these topics, and it's a credit to you, Lydia, the great work you do in this space, and it's our privilege to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you very much, Danny, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. We've got our second speaker lined up for you today. Welcome, Nemat. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, Lydia. How are you?
I'm good. I did try and dye my own eyebrows last night, but we're not here for that today. It wasn't successful. Look, thanks so much for coming on today. I just want to have a chat to you, but before we get into that, for people who don't know you, do you want to give a little bit of a background about you and the service that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. My name's Nemat. I'm the acting CEO of Muslim Women Australia. Muslim Women Australia has been around since 1983, and we were established to really support and facilitate the full participation of Muslim women in Australian society. So we've been around now for 38 years, and we support Muslim women, but women also from any other background, families as well, inclusive of men. We provide domestic violence support, as well as homelessness support, any support around housing, financial issues, for women, for their children, or for men and families at risk of homelessness. So that's some work that we've been doing for 35 years. We've got really experienced caseworkers who will provide you with safety, support for you and your children, looking at housing, legal, migration. So we provide that support whether you're an Australian citizen, a permanent resident, or new to the country on a temporary visa. It doesn't matter what your residency status is. If we can support you, we definitely will. And it'll be a very professional and expert support.
And you've been running this service, like I've said, for a very long time. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your insights regarding family violence and COVID, or family violence and lockdown. Have you noticed from a service provider's point of view any changes about how family violence is occurring or the rate in which it's occurring?
Yeah, so when we sort of went through lockdown, sort of March last year, what we realized and what we saw from there, and this is what we're anticipating at the moment as well, is that women who are facing violence, and that doesn't have to be physical violence, that can be financial abuse, emotional abuse, sexual, psychological abuse, any type of violence. It could be coercive behavior, controlling, not letting you speak on the phone or access services, or going and seeing your family, or any of those sorts of issues. What we found was, while most people are in lockdown, there is an outreach for support, but that usually spikes as soon as the restrictions are lifted. And the reason is because a lot of women aren't sure if they can seek support while they're in lockdown. And what we're here to say is, if you are in any harm, if you are facing financial, family conflict, family stress, if you're being abused in any way, shape or form, then you can seek support, that it is okay to leave the home to get support, whether it's from a doctor, from our service, from a lawyer. It is okay to do that. You can do it over the phone, you can do it online, you can do it in any way that you feel comfortable. The biggest challenge during lockdown, there's a few different challenges. For one, challenge is that um, in the scenario where a woman and her children are at home in a lockdown environment, not as able to access schools, or not as able to access services, or not as able to access any other things, then what happens is there's often an environment where, if the husband or the perpetrator or the partner is in the home, then sometimes that can really escalate the forms of abuse. And so some women can't take it for much longer, and that's when they seek help. For others, it's a scenario where they want to seek help, but the opportunities aren't there anymore because there's always somebody around. They can't speak safely. They can't speak, privately. And so what we want to say is, we are here, we are open, we're accessible on the phone, we're accessible online, whether it's through our website or through even Facebook. We're constantly getting requests and monitoring through Facebook. But if you need to come in to see a caseworker, to see someone, we are available 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And we also have a mobile number that can be accessible in the evenings, so from 5 p.m. till 11 as well. And so I'll put those up, but the best number to call for Linking Hearts is 9750 6916. And if you want an after hours mobile, or even just to text, it's 0412 549 524. But if you're ever in real danger and you're really not sure where to go, do not be afraid to call the police. I know right now that they're enforcing COVID and there's complaint, but they are still here to help. And if it's a domestic violence or an abusive situation, please do not be afraid to call the police in any way, shape or form.
And that's really important. We'll make sure that we'll share those numbers that you've provided at the end of the video as well, because it's very important that people understand that you are permitted to leave your home, even though we're in lockdown. If you need to have a medical appointment, if you need to attend upon a DV, counselling service or service provider, a mental health appointment, or even to leave the home to seek legal advice. So that's really important that people understand that. And I'm really happy that you clarified that you're an experienced organisation. You've been doing this for a really long time. Your doors are still open. Your doors are still open, but I know that you make a lot of referrals to other DV type services or other holistic organisations that a victim or a survivor needs to access. Can you tell me a little bit about whether or not their closures have impacted on the capacity to get help?
What I want to ensure, anybody who comes and reaches out to us for support, you will receive a proper and thorough safety plan and a safety assessment. And it's the caseworker's job, who's got that experience, to support you with all of that. So what we do is really take the stress and the hassle out of that support. We provide a range of support for what you need. So you can call, you can make an inquiry, you could need to get to leave right now. We can provide crisis support or crisis accommodation. And our caseworkers, if we don't have vacancy, will work with you to see who else because we're connected as part of the state-based services. Who else in those refuges has availability? We also have transitional housing support, where it's a long-term thing. It's not something where you come in for 1 week. It's a long-term case management plan. We'll look after any legal issues that you might need. We'll also assess any medical, financial, psychological issues, so you're not left alone through this process. As well, I'd like to stress, if you are in your home, don't think the only way to leave violence is for you to have to uproot yourself. You can we can support you in staying in your home and providing, depending on your level of risk and the level of safety, about staying connected to your home, connected to your family, connected to your schools. But that is all done on an individual assessment according to your needs and according to what we're able to provide at that time. So I don't want any woman to think the only way of leaving is for her to physically leave. If that's the safest thing to do, then we can assess that. But we're here to support women at any stage, and families at any stage. So even if it's about you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling unsafe and you're feeling like you need support, you need mediation, you need any type of counseling, you need someone to step in and try and even have a conversation from a men's behaviour or a men's referral service, that's something that we can also facilitate.
And I just want to add that, because there's not a lot of DV services or providers that actually address or take into account men who want to change, and the idea of men's behavioural change programs being out there. I know that your organisation's been doing this for decades, for a very, very long time, because often I find from a lawyer's point of view, the idea that DV survivors necessarily want to end a relationship isn't entirely correct. And I think to have a service that can, again, holistically look at what a client needs and what a family needs within a community and within a family structure, I think is incredibly important. It's probably why you've been around for so long, right?
It is because it's so important that we meet a woman or a child or a family or a man who doesn't know how his behavior is impacting others, where they are at. Of course, it's always done within a safety framework. The number one thing is the safety of you and your children, but we will not force our opinions onto you. We will actually listen to what you want for yourself and help you in that process, and help your family in that process. And that's why we offer individualized case management for the woman, but we also form individualized case management for children, because we know how much children can be impacted, and how really we need to build that sense of safety and confidence within the individual, because that is also part of the family unit. So we do have that response, but at the same time, it's not a one size fits all approach. There are families that need different things at different times. So we're not here to judge in any way. There is no right or wrong. It is just about facilitating support, because we know services can be difficult to navigate. It can be hard to know where to go. It can be hard to know what to do, but you aren't alone. We are here. We are very experienced. We have a lot of staff that can really provide a real experienced support. They know how the housing system works. They know how the refuge system works. They know we provide financial counselling. We have partnerships with Legal Aid and Marrickville Legal Centre and other lawyers that we can access, like Women's Legal Services as well, to provide that holistic support. So I just wanted to, my main message is, there is no right or wrong. There is no shame. There is nothing wrong with seeking support. Seeking support doesn't need to look like how I think it looks like. It's up to you to determine what that looks like for you, and we are here to support you in that process.
And I spoke earlier with Danny from Precision Integrity Services, and he spoke a lot about making sure if you know somebody or you think that somebody is experiencing family violence in the home, you need to tread quite carefully, because the last thing you want to do is engage with them and make the situation more unsafe for that person. So from your perspective, what are some things that people can do or just be aware of if they're suspecting that a loved one or a friend or someone they know in the workplace even is at risk of family violence or is indeed experiencing it?
I think the best thing that somebody can do is let them know that it's a safe place for them to talk if they want to. I think don't try and jump to solutions for that person. Just be there to listen. And it's okay if that person doesn't want to tell you everything at once. It's okay if they want to slowly open up to you. Just let them know that you're there and that you're listening without judgment, because it's a concept called response-based practice. And if somebody is reaching out, if they're sharing, if they're letting you know in any way, shape, or form that they might be in at harm, or that they might be at risk, then the best thing you can do is really be really mindful and really conscious of what you say and what you don't say and how you say it. Because if that person feels judged by you, if that person feels criticized, then they will most likely not open up again. And so the best thing you can really do is have just a real mindfulness in the way that you speak. Let them know that it's okay to seek support. They are not the only one to go through this. There are many people, many women, many families have experienced this. And I think even though we talk about increased numbers and why is DB increasing, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it means that people are aware that they have rights and they have and they deserve to live with safety and dignity and respect. And there's no shame around saying it. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with what you're doing. You deserve to be treated with respect and safety. And I think the best thing anyone can do is let them know that it's okay to seek support. It's okay to talk. And if you need, it's okay to reach out, whether it's reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a service. If you need the police, call them. They're here for you too. That's absolutely what I would suggest. So just be really mindful and vigilant about what you say and what you don't say, and what you're perpetuating as well, because we sometimes blame the person who's seeking help, and we really need to be mindful. Are we blaming this person in the questions that we're asking? Are you saying, oh, what have you done to make him so upset? Or why don't you just, if he doesn't like that, why don't you do things differently? These basic questions, these basic responses that we just come out with are actually harmful. And so we need to be conscious. Are we perpetuating harm, or are we perpetuating a safe of openness and safety and security for somebody? And that's something anybody can do.
That is such fantastic advice, because even though the awareness of what behaviours are considered family violence, we often don't look at the responses if it's happening to someone that we love, because our initial reaction sometimes, you're quite right, can perpetuate harm, which is absolutely not what we want to do.
Yeah. Sorry, Lydia, I was just going to say, if that's okay, I just think it's also really important that we get away from these concepts of a perfect victim and a perfect perpetrator. We know that life is not black and white. And that's why I think, as you said, something our organization's been really, we take pride on, is not having a black and white approach to life, and understanding that you might go back and forth in trying to seek support multiple times, or you might want to try mediation and then you get to a point where that's okay. There's no right or wrong in this. The right or wrong is building your self-worth, your confidence, and your capacity to make good decisions for yourself and for your children.
No, that was beautifully put. What I was about to say, is there anything else that you want to direct in terms of messaging to people who might be listening to this and they are feeling a bit scared in their own home? It's not a safe place. Is there anything you want to say to them before we head off?
Yeah, I just want to say, and please remind you that please do not feel any shame in reaching out for support. We are all here to help. This is a really challenging time for everybody. This is a really challenging time where families are under immense pressure. There's a lot of family stress. There's a lot of family conflict. There's a lot of financial, employment, mental health impacts that are happening right now. You are not alone, but you do not need to be in a place where you compromise your sense of safety. So if you are in that predicament, please reach out. We're available anytime. Like I said, you can make an appointment to come into the office. Our doors are still open. It's at Muslim Women Australia. It's called the Linking Heart Service. So please feel free to reach out on that number that I'll share with you, Lydia, at the end. You can also reach out on mobile. You can text. You can get through to us on our website, on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever works for you. but please take care of your mental, physical health, emotional, spiritual well-being. If you're in any danger in any way, if things escalate in any way, do not feel afraid to call the police on 000.
Thank you so much for the advice and for sharing your knowledge with us. I think it's going to be very beneficial for people to have heard that and to understand the messages and their capacity to cause change and to help other people during this really, really difficult time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lydia. I really appreciate you taking the time, and please reach out to those you love. Just because we're physically distant, it doesn't mean we need to be socially isolated. So please reach out and do it in the best, safest, most caring, genuine way possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much to Nemat from Muslim Women Australia and Danny from Precision Integrity Services for both coming on today, very short notice, and really giving us the information that we need with respect to family violence during lockdown. If you or somebody that you know is at risk of experiencing family or domestic violence whilst at home, there are a list of numbers that I've provided at the end of this video. Please use them, and please note that it is a reasonable excuse for you to leave your home during the lockdown period to attend domestic violence or counselling sessions, mental health appointments and legal appointments. So if you need to access services, they are still open, and I would urge you to share this information with anybody who you might think is at risk or requires that information. Stay safe, everybody.